Hello and welcome back to Bold Moves by Wanjiru Kihusa. My name is Wanjiru and I am really happy to have you here. In this podcast, we talk about living an audacious life, moving from your comfort zone, being truly aware of who you are and bringing your full authentic self. Today's episode, I'm going to be sharing about my journey from Kenya to the UAE to the UK and all the lessons that I have learned along the way in this case. And so I want to invite you, when you listen to this podcast, to leave a review, to, of course, follow in whichever platform you're listening to, and to drop me an email if you have any questions or anything you'd like me to cover, and a topic that you'd like me to come and talk about, a guest that you think I should invite. Drop me an email at wanjirukihusa@gmail.com. I'm Wanjiru Kihusa on Instagram, and I can also be found as Caroline Wanjiru Kiunga on LinkedIn. And I did this because I added my first name, just because that's what I use in the office. All in all, thank you very much for joining me. While I was in Kenya, I was running Still a Mom, a nonprofit that supports parents who've lost a baby. And I did this from 2014 because our daughter passed away in 2013. And I ran Still a Mom until around 2019, 2020. There's a gap there somewhere, but there's a reason for it. And I am so honored to have been able to work with over 8,000 bereaved moms and dads. And maybe in another episode, I can share my experience running a nonprofit and the lessons that I learned from it. But I got the opportunity to just firsthand experience parents who've lost a baby heal. And I was part of that healing journey. Now, by the time I was doing this alongside my co-founder, I had 4 full-time employees and about 6 volunteers at the time. What happened was we were given a grant by Facebook at some point. That was, I think, 2018. I participated in something called the Facebook Community Leadership Program. Again, building on my previous post about put yourself out there. What if they say yes? Apply for that thing. And so I sat down and applied, and I got in. And part of the program was a $50,000 grant, which was very good money, that would then aid the work that I was doing at the time, and allowed me to have 1 full year of hybrid training on community leadership. And I got an amazing opportunity to fly to Menlo Park, San Francisco, to the Facebook headquarters. And I'm in Meta, now they're called Meta, not Facebook, to Meta headquarters. And I got to learn alongside a ton of other people that were making a very big difference in the world, in other countries. I remember, I think from Kenya, we had 6 people who were participating out of 14 who were the African participants. All in all, it was such an amazing experience. And receiving this funding was so great because it allowed me, first of all, to have a counseling center. Our counseling center was on Gong Road, and we were able to have people come in, whether it was for group sessions or one-on-one therapy. I finally was able to hire a full-time counselor, something that I had been desiring for a long time, and I got to work with an amazing lady in this field. And that was what was going on. Around that time, we were thinking about sustainability, in the sense that how can we move away from only relying on donor funding to be able to do our job. And at the time we were fundraising from individuals. We had people who were consistent givers, and that was an amazing thing. But at the same time, it was never enough, because we wanted to get to a place where we could provide free counseling for those who could not afford it, or at least significantly subsidized counseling for those that needed it. Whether, again, it is peer group support groups, or the one-on-one therapy or couples therapy, whatever that looked like. And so we began to venture out, and we were also starting to see a need in the healthcare space, where healthcare workers, your doctors, your midwives, needed training on respectful bereavement care. And this is a really big positive, It's one of those things that I am proud I was able to do, that we did get respectful bereavement care embedded in the government policy of respectful maternal care. So when somebody loses a baby in the hospital, how they, the news is broken, are they given an opportunity to see their child and to hold? What's the disposal like of the bodies and things like that? I don't want to go into that in this podcast though, but we were making so much progress in that arena. We were working on the maternity, the Employment Act, to allow for women in Kenya to receive maternity leave, even if, or for example, maybe compassion leave in case of of child loss. Unfortunately, because of the change of governments, that didn't quite happen. We worked, I think, through 2-3 drafts, and then the government shifted, and that sort of work, unfortunately, was lost along the way. I do hope that one day that still gets done. But I'm sharing that this is where still our mom was at the time. My co-founder and I what we're talking about is how can we create these trainings, and we began to do that. We created trainings where we would go into hospitals, into institutions, to teach them about how to cater for those who are bereaved, how to break news, how to bring empathy to the situation, to an already really bad situation. And we had started to get away, sort of to get an income to pay our bills, but we hadn't quite gotten to that break-even point, and so we were still applying for grants. And then in 2019, we went through a season where it was just a series of no's. It feels like you're knocking on the door and nothing is opening up. And we did decide eventually to close down Still a Mom, and this was hastened or catalyzed and accelerated by the fact that one of those days, my husband came home and said, "Hey, there's this role in my job. I'm thinking about applying for it. It's in Dubai. What do you think?" And earlier on in our marriage, we had a time where he was in South Africa for a short-term job assignment, and we were apart, and it didn't go very well. We hated it. We absolutely hated it. We realized we don't do long distance relationships very well, and we had agreed that from here on, if anything is longer than 3 months, you're welcome to travel for less, but if anything is more than 3 months, we have to move together, or we don't take it at all. So around that same time, that was happening in his career, and there was this opportunity, and it was such a hard decision. We usually say we hit pause on Still a Mom. We didn't. We did not close it down. We did not shut down. And I still pay for the domain names for the website and still like that. But it was a difficult decision to get to, because we had space, a whole office. I had staff, employees that I needed to figure out. I was their source of livelihood, and I needed to figure out what that was going to look like. But sort of just to cut the long story short, is we worked it out in such a way that we were able to let go of our employees in good faith, giving them adequate time. One of my tenants at the time that we had subleased to took on the office as it was, so I didn't have to sell the furniture, take down the partitions and things like that. And for me, because I am a person of faith, it was a place for me where God really showed me that the move was his idea, and that it's okay. It's okay. Right now, it feels like we're closing down, and that's all right. I will make this transition work out well. And so I prayed through it. And I remember just sharing even with my co-founder, and we talked about this, and we said, hey, let's also not overestimate our importance. God has been able to use us to bring healing to thousands of people, but healing will continue to happen with or without us. And we do hope that we will one day come back to this space, but for now, it's okay. And that's it. So it's 2019. I'm closing down Still a Mom. My husband has this new job, and we have agreed to move to Dubai. And so we packed up our lives. My husband went a month ahead of us, of course, to house hunt and do all of that. And so I packed all my belongings, and I put them in six suitcases, and I moved myself and my 2.5-year-old son at the time. And this is the part that I wanted to start off sharing my lessons of moving, of transition, of leaving things behind. And I want to say one of my biggest lessons has been things are just things. And here I mean material things. I remember coming across stuff like that were wedding gifts, kitchen sets, plates we had never used. Not that we weren't using them, but there were just so many and so many gifts that had been stashed somewhere. And things are just things. We, at the time, we lived in a 4-bedroom house with a lovely backyard. We had 2 cars in the compound, and we moved, and we got up and uprooted our lives, and we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment on the 29th floor, which is really odd because it felt so tall and so high at first. Then we got used to it. But we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment, and didn't have a car for, I think, actually almost 2 years while we were living in Dubai. And now that we've moved to London, now we are in a 2-bedroom apartment. While in Dubai, we moved to a bigger place, and then we finally did get a car. And now that we've moved to London, again, smaller place, and houses in London are so small. So just that transition has been interesting to watch. The learning that things are things. Don't be too keen to hold on to stuff. And the second thing is we've become really minimalistic. Like I said, when we were packing our lives, it was so interesting to see things we had not used before. And so now we have, I don't want to say the exact number of plates, but we have just enough for you to, use maybe for 2 meals, maybe lunch and dinner, and then do dishes, And of course, if we have visitors, we are able to host. But this idea of accumulation and accumulating, we've really, really stopped. Anyway, and so we get to Dubai. It's an amazing experience because for me, I don't have a job at this point. My husband is working, and we have a 2.5-year-old son. We didn't move with our helper back from Kenya, our nanny. So we are here, just the 3 of us. And then, just to make things interesting, and because God has a sense of humor, COVID. And so we are now cooped up in a house. But then we missed, like we would have, it was 8 days after we arrived that COVID struck, and thank goodness we had just the basics. We had basic furniture, we had just the basics, but we were able to live our life. And this is now where I would bring in my second lesson, and I would say transit with clarity, or transit with a plan. When you get there, have a plan. And for me, I knew that I was going to have a 2.5-year-old and no nanny. And I didn't know about COVID, but what I had decided to do was to sort of homeschool. But I don't mean to really full on teach him from morning to evening or something like that. But I was very deliberate with how I was going to spend time with my child. And so before I left Kenya, I found this lady who was doing a really amazing faith-based curriculum that taught, that they had materials, the ABCs, tracing things, writing, stickers on the walls. And so when I arrived, I picked a corner in our house, and that became our school. And so I put on charts. We have with the alphabet, the numbers, the days of the week, and things like that. And I would teach him. I structured the days, because now you can imagine, even with COVID making it worse, my husband would be logging in and working, and I would be spending time with Keith, our son. And so I was teaching, and then probably an hour or 2 in the morning, and giving that routine as well, and some form of structure to his life, because my first priority was not to get a job or decide what am I going to do with my life, was making sure that the transition was good for him. And so I did that, and I'm so grateful, because even when COVID started and schools, he was supposed to enroll for schools, but schools hadn't physically opened. We did his first term of school was online, and I would sit with him and, navigating Zoom for, I think he was 3 years old at the time, but just working with him, and then having him come with me, cook with me, go to the supermarket with me. And so that clarity of, I'm transitioning and this is my role. And I think that really helped me to not feel like, oh my God, I need to find a job immediately. Oh my God, what am I doing here? And I feel like it was easier for my husband because he arrived and plugged right into work. But for me, I appreciate that there was need for, okay, what should I do now that I have arrived? That is clarity and some form of like, it's a plan. It also allows for you not to feel too much overwhelmed. And then the third thing has been making friends. So we spent 5 years in Dubai, almost 5 years. And we, of course, had built relationships with people. I remember, again, because of COVID, I knew, I think, only one friend, Kenyan, who we went to high school with. And the cab ride to get to her was probably like 100 dirham. It was expensive, just one way. And at some point I was like, you know what? You can't just stick in your comfort zone, just going to see that one friend. You need to make friends wherever you are. And so I began to be more deliberate with saying hi to other moms in the playground. And to date, my son's best friend is from our very first apartment when we moved to Dubai. And his mom ended up being such a dear, dear friend of mine. And maybe one day I will share about how I have realized that people are so similar, regardless of which part of the world you are. If you talk to women, challenges are the same. We would have a good laugh about children, husbands, in-laws, working, balancing, all of that. And so we made friends. So again, being deliberate to build a community, we found a church. Somebody had told us this, that Dubai is very fast-paced and it can feel very show-off-ish. Like everyone is out there making a ton of money, living grand lives. You might get lost in all of it if you don't find a church community. And so we did. And so it's in the communities, it's in the friends, it's in the deliberately organizing baby shower, birthdays, and things like that, just ensuring that the community, you're fully engaged into building that community. I saw on Instagram the other day that it takes a village, but nobody tells you that you have to make the village yourself, right? Or at the very least, you have to show up consistently so that village can be a reality. And then the fourth thing I'd say, I feel like the move to London needs a full episode by itself because it's been such a big thing, and how I came to get here because I raised my hand and said I want to do a certain job at work, and I said I was ready to move, and then I feel like UPS said, sure, let's do that. And we moved our entire life again out of Dubai and into London in 2024. And I would like to say and end this podcast on, is phenomenal for anyone that is willing to be wrong. And I say this with regard to stereotypes about certain cultures. I got into the Middle East with all of these preconceived ideas that I thought I knew about the Middle East. And I got there and I realized I was wrong. Number two, I got there and I was a minority, right? As a Christian, I lived in a Muslim country. And by the way, I loved it. And I want to end this podcast on this part, that travel and living abroad and living with other people, different cultures, is fantastic for anyone who is willing to be wrong, to face your stereotypes and the things you thought you knew about a people or a country and be like, oh, I was wrong. My bad. That's okay. Now I know better, So I feel like traveling, you cannot be, and you'd have to be so lazy to have traveling have no effect on you. And so I would say, like, when I got to Dubai, I had all these things I thought I knew about the Middle East, stories the media had told me about oppression and women. And I'm not saying it's a perfect country. It has its flaws. There's the underbelly of the UAE. But I have a whole new appreciation of the Middle East, Number two, as a Christian, for the first time, I was a minority. I came into a country where Islam is the country's religion and the practices around it. When we first got there, Sunday was a working day and Friday was the day of worship. So as people went to the mosque, I went to church. That took a while to get around to. Listening, seeing so many mosques and listening to the call of prayer. Ramadan in the Middle East, it's amazing, But again, you have to move away from your ignorance by immersing yourself. You cannot stay on the periphery. You can't stay on the sidelines. It can leave you unchanged if you choose to, but I hope you don't do that. But I loved going to the mosque and learning. There are a ton of places to go and learn and ask questions. I took a class that's usually done, a cultural class that's usually done in Dubai, the old side of Dubai. I went for iftars. I visited colleagues, from Egypt, Dubai, Libya, all of these, colleagues from the office who, when they were fasting, I asked questions, and of course I got invited to iftar, which I love, or suhoor in the morning, which I absolutely love. I went for a ton of events and I was eager to just soak in the experience and learn new things. And I am doing the very same. I've been in London, in the UK for less than a year now, and I am doing the same. I have come in with an open mind. Sure, there are things I have heard about Brits, the English, and I have my preconception. I also have to admit that as a Kenyan, I have an adversarial relationship with this country because of colonization. So I feel some type of way. But at the very same time, I know, and I'm keeping myself open to new experiences and meeting new amazing people. And already I have made quite a number of good friends in my neighborhood, people that are like, oh, we got invited to a Christmas party. I attended a wine tasting event hosted by somebody who's lived in France, but, grew up here and is our neighbor. So just opening yourself up to be wrong, to learn and unlearn, but also just putting yourself out there to create that village. So those are some of my lessons from sort of the last couple of years where I have lived in these countries. And I hope that it's been a learning opportunity for you. Go off this week. Remember, things are just things. It's okay to be wrong, and you can unlearn and learn new things. And number 2, please aggressively and deliberately participate in the making of that village that you desire.